The autumn wind cut through Rockford, Illinois, with a bite that reminded everyone winter wasn't far behind. October 14, 2010, started like any other Wednesday morning in the Thornton household, rushed, chaotic, and filled with the ordinary sounds of a family preparing for another day. Claire Thornton stood at the kitchen counter, packing lunches for her teenagers while the coffee maker gurgled its final drops into the pot. The radio played softly in the background, some morning talk show host discussing the upcoming midterm elections. "Madison, Tyler, you're going to miss the bus. Going to miss..." Claire called up the stairs, her voice carrying that particular pitch of maternal exasperation that had become second nature after 15 years of parenting. Footsteps thundered down the wooden staircase as 15-year-old Madison appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair still damp from the shower. Behind her, 13-year-old Tyler descended more slowly, earbuds already in place, his attention locked on the phone in his hands. "Dad already left?" Madison asked, grabbing the lunch bag her mother extended toward her. "About 20 minutes ago," Claire replied, glancing at the clock on the microwave. 6:47 a.m. He had that early meeting with the regional manager. Said he'd probably be home late. James Thornton had kissed his wife goodbye at 6:15 that morning, just as the sun began painting the sky in shades of pale gray. Claire remembered the scratch of his stubble against her cheek, the familiar scent of his cologne, something woody and masculine that she'd given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. He'd been wearing his navy suit, the one that made his gray eyes look almost silver in certain light. Nothing about that morning suggested it would be the last time she'd see her husband. Nothing at all. The day crawled forward with agonizing normalcy. Claire worked her shift at Riverside Hospital, where she'd been a registered nurse for 12 years. She checked vitals, administered medications, and chatted with patients about their grandchildren and the weather. During her lunch break, she texted James, "How's the meeting going?" The message showed as delivered but remained unread. That wasn't unusual. James often got absorbed in work and forgot to check his phone. By 3 o'clock, when Madison and Tyler arrived home from school, there was still no word from James. Claire, finishing up her shift at the hospital, felt the first flutter of unease in her chest, something she couldn't quite name, just a whisper of wrongness at the edge of her consciousness. "Mom wants to know if you're picking up dinner on the way home," Madison's text read when it came through at 5:30 p.m. Claire stared at her phone. She'd called James 4 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. She told herself his phone had died. He'd forgotten to charge it overnight. It had happened before. But James was meticulous about that sort of thing. He was meticulous about everything. She called his office. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Brenda, told her that James had never arrived for his meeting that morning. "Mr. Peterson was quite upset," Brenda explained. "He'd driven in from Chicago specifically for this. We've been trying to reach James all day." The flutter in Claire's chest transformed into something heavier, colder. "Are you sure? Maybe he went to a different office?" "No, Mrs. Thornton. The meeting was definitely here. Is everything all right?" Claire ended the call without answering. Her hands trembled as she dialed the Rockford Police Department. The officer who took her call was patient but firm. Adults have the right to go where they please. Unless there was evidence of foul play, or he was considered at risk, they couldn't file a missing person report until he'd been gone for 24 hours. "He probably just needed some time to himself, ma'am. Men do that sometimes. I'm sure he'll turn up." But Claire knew. Some instinct buried deep in her bones told her that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. She drove home in a daze, the familiar streets of Rockford blurring past her windows. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of orange and red, a beautiful backdrop to the nightmare beginning to unfold. When she pulled into the driveway of their modest 2-story home on Elmwood Avenue, she saw Madison and Tyler peering out the front window, their faces etched with concern. "Dad's not answering his phone," Madison said the moment Claire walked through the door. At 15, she was already taller than her mother, with James's strong jawline and Claire's dark eyes. Tyler said his car wasn't at his office. "How do you know that?" Claire asked. Tyler, his face pale, held up his phone. "I use that tracking app. The one Dad put on all our phones after I got lost at that concert. His phone is at Pierce Lake." The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the house. Pierce Lake, a sprawling body of water on the southern edge of Rockford, surrounded by forest preserve. A place where James sometimes went fishing on weekends. A place people went when they wanted to be alone. A place people went to disappear. Claire felt her legs weaken. She sank onto the couch, her nursing training momentarily deserting her as the room seemed to tilt. "Show me." Tyler brought his phone over, hands shaking. The blue dot marking James's phone location pulsed steadily at the western shore of Pierce Lake, in the parking area near the boat launch. It had been stationary for hours. "Mom?" Madison's voice cracked. "Where's Dad?" Claire wanted to say something reassuring, something that would erase the fear creeping into her children's eyes, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she grabbed her keys. "Stay here. Lock the doors. I'll be back soon." The drive to Pierce Lake took 18 minutes. 18 minutes during which Claire's mind raced through every possibility. Maybe his car had broken down. Maybe he'd gone for a walk and gotten hurt. Maybe he'd had a heart attack. He was only 38, but his father had died young. Maybe she saw the car before she'd even fully pulled into the parking lot. James's silver Honda Accord sat alone in the gravel lot, facing the lake. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the water and painting the sky in violent shades of pink and orange. Claire parked beside his car and approached slowly, as if the vehicle might somehow explain everything. The driver's side door was unlocked. She pulled it open with a hand that no longer felt like her own. James's phone lay on the passenger seat, its battery at 2%. His wallet was there too, driver's license visible through the clear plastic window. His work laptop bag sat in the back seat. Everything was there. Everything except James. Claire walked to the edge of the water, her feet crunching on fallen leaves and gravel. The lake stretched out before her, dark and still, holding its secrets beneath the surface. A wooden dock extended 30 feet into the water, and she found herself walking toward it, compelled by some force she didn't understand. That's where she saw them. His shoes. James's black leather dress shoes, the ones he'd worn that morning, placed neatly side by side at the end of the dock. Not kicked off or abandoned, placed, deliberately, as if he'd removed them before. No, the word escaped her lips as a whisper, then louder. No, no, no. She ran back to her car and called 911, her voice breaking as she tried to explain what she'd found. The dispatcher's calm questions felt surreal, disconnected from the horror unfolding around her. Police arrived within minutes, their red and blue lights cutting through the growing darkness. Then came the search and rescue boats, their spotlights sweeping across the water in systematic patterns. Detective Raymond Walsh, a heavyset man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gravelly voice shaped by too many cigarettes, approached Claire where she sat in the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, though she couldn't remember anyone putting it there. "Mrs. Thornton, I need to ask you some questions about your husband. I know this is difficult, but the first few hours are critical." Claire nodded, though she couldn't feel her head moving. "He wouldn't do this. James wouldn't. He has children. He loves us. Was your husband depressed? Had he been under any unusual stress?" "No, I mean work was busy, but it was always busy. He was fine. We were fine." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Had they been fine? James had seemed distracted lately, more withdrawn. How many nights had he stayed late at the office in the past few months? How many times had she caught him staring into space, his mind clearly somewhere else? She'd attributed it to work stress, to the pressures of providing for a family. But what if it had been something more? Did he have any financial troubles? Legal issues? Affairs? The question hit Claire like a physical blow. No, James isn't. He wouldn't. Detective Walsh's expression softened. "I have to ask these questions, Mrs. Thornton. I'm sorry. We need to understand his state of mind." The search continued through the night. Divers would come at first light, Walsh explained. The water was too dark, too dangerous now. Claire called her sister, who came to sit with Madison and Tyler. She called James's parents in Florida, heard his mother's scream echo through the phone line. She called his office, his friends, everyone she could think of who might know something, anything. But as the hours stretched into morning and the sun rose on October 15th, illuminating the lake in cruel, beautiful light, one fact became increasingly clear. James Thornton had vanished, and the evidence suggested he'd walked into that lake and never walked back out. 3 days later, when the search had yielded nothing, no body, no additional clues, nothing but those shoes on the dock and his abandoned possessions in the car, Detective Walsh sat across from Claire in her living room and delivered his preliminary assessment. "Based on the evidence, Mrs. Thornton, we're treating this as a likely suicide. I'm very sorry. Sometimes the lake doesn't give up its dead for weeks, even months, but we'll keep looking. Suicide." The word hung in the air like poison. Madison, sitting beside her mother on the couch, let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. Tyler sat silent, his face blank. already retreating into whatever psychological shelter teenagers build to protect themselves from unbearable truth. And Claire, staring at the detective with eyes that had forgotten how to cry, could only think, but I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to ask him why. I didn't get to save him. The case file would officially remain open, but in practice it joined the thousands of other missing person cases that fade from active investigation into the realm of cold cases and fading hope. The lake would be dragged again in the spring. James's face would appear on missing person bulletins and websites. But as autumn turned to winter and 2010 drew to a close, the Thornton family began the agonizing process of learning to live with questions that had no answers and a grief that had no body to bury. None of them could have imagined that a decade later, everything they thought they knew about that October morning would be revealed as a lie. That James Thornton wasn't at the bottom of Pierce Lake. That he was alive, breathing, living an entirely different life in a city 2,000 miles away. That the real horror wasn't what had happened to him, but what he had done to them. The years after October 14, 2010 didn't heal the Thornton family. They hollowed them out, carved away pieces of who they'd been until only grief-shaped shells remained. Claire learned that you don't get over losing someone to a lake that never gives back a body. You don't move on when every phone call could be the police saying they finally found something. You exist in a perpetual state of waiting, suspended between the life you had and the life you're supposed to build from the ruins. The first year was the worst. Claire returned to work at Riverside Hospital 3 weeks after James disappeared, moving through her shifts like a ghost in scrubs. Her colleagues whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, "Poor Claire, such a tragedy, and with 2 kids, how will she manage?" Their pity felt like acid on her skin. She began picking up extra shifts, anything to avoid the empty house where James's absence screamed from every corner. His coffee mug still sat in the cabinet. His winter coat hung in the closet. She couldn't bring herself to pack his things away because packing them away meant accepting he was never coming home. Madison threw herself into her studies with manic intensity, as if perfect grades could somehow rewrite the past. She graduated high school 2 years later as valedictorian, her speech carefully crafted to avoid mentioning the father who wasn't there to watch her walk across that stage. She chose Northwestern University in Chicago, close enough to come home on weekends but far enough to pretend she had a normal life. She studied business administration with a minor in psychology, drawn to understanding human behavior in ways she couldn't articulate. Why do people do what they do? How do you know who someone really is? Her therapist, the third one, the only one she didn't quit after 2 sessions, said she was trying to solve her father's disappearance through academia. Madison didn't disagree. Tyler's response was different, quieter, more insidious. He stopped talking about his father after the first year, simply erased James from his conversations as if he'd never existed. When relatives asked how he was coping, he'd shrug and change the subject. He got into gaming, spending hours in virtual worlds where fathers didn't abandon their families, and lakes didn't swallow people whole. Claire worried about him constantly, but her worry felt impotent against the wall he'd built around himself. By the time he graduated high school in 2015, he'd been accepted to the University of Oregon, about as far from Rockford as he could get without leaving the country. "I just need a fresh start, Mom," he'd said. And what could Claire say to that? Didn't they all need a fresh start? The second anniversary of James's disappearance brought a small memorial service at Pierce Lake. James's parents flew in from Florida. His mother had aged a decade in 2 years. Her face collapsed in on itself with grief. Friends and co-workers attended, speaking in hushed tones about what a good man James had been, how tragic it all was. Detective Walsh came too, still officially assigned to the case, though Claire knew there was nothing left to investigate. The lake had been dragged 3 more times. Divers had searched every inch of the bottom. Nothing. James Thornton had simply ceased to exist on October 14, 2010. By the 5th anniversary, the memorial service had dwindled to just Claire, Madison, and Tyler. They stood on that same dock where James's shoes had been found, each lost in private thoughts they no longer shared with each other. The thing about tragedy, Claire had learned, is that it doesn't bring families closer. It shows you all the ways you're fundamentally alone in your suffering. Madison cried silently, tears streaming down her face as the autumn wind whipped around them. Tyler stood stone-faced, hands jammed in his pockets, present in body only. And Claire found herself angry, furious at James for leaving them like this, for choosing the lake over his family, for being so weak or so selfish or so broken that he couldn't stay. She'd been through his computer files 100 times in those first years, searching for some explanation. Bank statements showed nothing unusual. No suspicious withdrawals, no secret accounts. His email was mundane, work correspondence, spam, a few exchanges with his parents and college friends about football games and weekend plans. His search history revealed nothing darker than sports scores and news articles. There were no dating site profiles, no evidence of an affair, no trail of digital breadcrumbs leading to an answer. It was as if James had simply decided one morning that he was done and walked into the lake without looking back. The life insurance company had been less charitable. Without a body, without definitive proof of death, they refused to pay out the policy. Claire hired a lawyer, money she didn't have spent on a legal battle she couldn't win. After 7 years, Illinois law would allow James to be declared legally dead, the lawyer explained. 7 years. It might as well have been eternity. Claire worked overtime, took on extra shifts, slowly drowned in medical bills and mortgage payments and the ordinary crushing weight of single parenthood. James's parents sent money when they could, but they were living on fixed incomes, already struggling with their own grief. Madison graduated from Northwestern in 2017 with honors and immediately landed a position with a marketing firm in Chicago. She was good at her job, brilliant even, creating campaigns that connected with people on an emotional level. Her supervisor said she had an uncanny ability to understand what drove people, what fears and desires lurked beneath the surface. Madison never told her that she'd spent 7 years analyzing every conversation she'd ever had with her father, searching for the clue she'd missed, the sign that he was planning to leave them. She'd become an expert at reading between the lines because the alternative was accepting that there were no lines to read, that her father had left no clues because he hadn't wanted to be found. She dated occasionally but never seriously. The men she met seemed nice enough, but Madison found herself constantly watching for warning signs: emotional distance, unexplained absences, the subtle withdrawals that might precede abandonment. Her therapist called it hypervigilance, a trauma response. Madison called it learning from experience. She'd brought exactly 2 boyfriends home to meet her mother, and both relationships had ended within months. How do you build a future with someone when you're still trapped in the past? In 2019, Madison was promoted to senior marketing consultant, a position that required occasional travel to conferences and client meetings across the country. She'd always loved traveling, loved the anonymity of hotels and airports, the way you could be anyone in a city where nobody knew your story. Portland, Seattle, Miami, Austin, each city offered a temporary escape from being Madison Thornton, the girl whose father drowned himself in Pierce Lake. October 14, 2020 marked 10 years since James's disappearance. A decade. Madison was 25 now, the same age her mother had been when she'd married James. Tyler was 23, working as a software developer in Portland and rarely calling home. Claire was 51, her hair prematurely gray, her face lined with years of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. There was no memorial service that year. The COVID-19 pandemic had turned the world upside down, and gathering at the lake seemed both impossible and pointless. What was there left to say? James had been legally declared dead 3 years earlier, a court proceeding that felt both necessary and obscene. They'd held a funeral with an empty casket, a bizarre ritual that brought no closure. Madison had stood at the podium and delivered a eulogy for a father who might be at the bottom of a lake, or might be nowhere at all, and the absurdity of it had nearly broken her. 3 weeks after that grim anniversary, Madison received an email from her company. She was being sent to a digital marketing conference in Portland, Oregon. 4 days, all expenses paid, networking with industry leaders and potential clients. Under normal circumstances, she would have been thrilled. But these weren't normal circumstances. The pandemic was still raging, and the thought of traveling felt both risky and exhausting. "You should go," her mother said during their weekly phone call. Claire had gotten better at hiding her depression over the years, better at pretending she was okay. "Tyler's there. You could see him." Madison doubted that. Tyler had been dodging her calls for months, claiming to be busy with work, but she suspected the truth was simpler. He'd moved to Portland to escape their shared history, and her presence would drag all those carefully buried memories back to the surface. Still, Claire was right. It had been almost 2 years since she'd seen her brother in person. She accepted the assignment. The conference was held at the Portland Convention Center, a massive complex in the city's Lloyd district. Madison flew in on a gray Tuesday morning in early November, The kind of day where the clouds hung so low you felt you could reach up and touch them. Portland greeted her with rain. Not the violent thunderstorms of Illinois, but a persistent drizzle that seemed less like weather and more like a state of being. Her hotel was downtown, a boutique place with exposed brick and local artwork in every room. She unpacked, showered, and dressed in her conference attire, a navy pantsuit that cost more than her first car and made her look older than 25. Professional, competent, someone who definitely hadn't spent 10 years haunted by her father's ghost. The conference itself was the usual mixture of informative and tedious. Panel discussions on digital trends, keynote speakers who used too many buzzwords, networking sessions that felt like speed dating for professionals. Madison collected business cards and made small talk, her mind only half present. She kept thinking about Tyler, whether she should text him, whether showing up unannounced at his apartment would be welcome or invasive. By Thursday afternoon, she decided against it. Tyler would call when he was ready. Forcing the issue would only push him further away. She was walking back to her hotel around 5 o'clock, umbrella open against the persistent drizzle, when her world tilted on its axis. The sidewalk was crowded with the end-of-workday rush, people hurrying toward parking garages and bus stops. Madison was checking her phone, composing a text to her mother about flight times when she happened to glance up and saw him. He was across the street, walking with a woman and 2 small children. A girl, maybe 6 years old, skipping ahead. A boy, younger, holding the woman's hand. And the man. Madison's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the wet sidewalk. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But she knew that walk, that particular forward lean, the way his left shoulder dipped slightly lower than his right. She knew the shape of his head, the set of his jaw. She'd spent 10 years trying to forget that silhouette and failing. The man laughed at something the little girl said, and Madison heard it, actually heard it across the traffic noise and rain. That familiar rumbling laugh she'd heard 1,000 times growing up. Dad? The word came out as a whisper, barely audible even to herself. He was older, his hair grayer, but it was him. It was James Thornton, her father, the man who had been dead for 10 years, walking down a Portland street with a family that wasn't his, that wasn't supposed to exist, that couldn't exist. Madison's legs moved without conscious thought. She stepped off the curb, heard a car horn blare, stumbled back. By the time she looked again, they'd turned a corner. She ran, her professional heels slipping on wet pavement, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. When she rounded the corner, the street was empty, except for the rain. Madison stood on that rain-soaked Portland sidewalk staring at the empty street corner where her father, or his ghost, or her madness, had vanished. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone, which she'd retrieved from the pavement with a cracked screen now spiderwebbing across the display. People flowed around her like water around a stone, annoyed at the obstacle she'd become, but she couldn't move. Her feet felt welded to the concrete. It wasn't him. It couldn't be him. James Thornton had walked into Pierce Lake on October 14, 2010 and never walked out. The police had searched. Divers had searched. For 10 years, her family had grieved a dead man. Dead men don't walk down Portland streets with children who call them daddy. But Madison knew what she'd seen. Every instinct in her body, every cell that carried her father's DNA, screamed recognition. That was James Thornton. Older, grayer, but unmistakably alive. She forced herself to walk back to her hotel, though she couldn't remember the route. Her mind kept replaying those few seconds. The tilt of his head, the way his hand rested on the little girl's shoulder, the casual intimacy of a family walking home on a Thursday evening. A family. He had another family. In her hotel room, Madison sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. Her therapist had taught her techniques for managing panic attacks. Count backward from 100. Name 5 things you can see. Focus on your senses. But none of it worked. Her vision tunneled. Her chest constricted. She grabbed her phone and pulled up her mother's contact, her thumb hovering over the call button. What would she even say? Mom, I think I just saw Dad alive in Portland with another woman and kids who aren't us. It sounded insane. It was insane. Maybe she'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the stress of the conference, the anniversary of his disappearance, the decade of unprocessed trauma had finally broken something in her brain. But she knew. God help her. She knew. Madison didn't call her mother. Instead, she opened her laptop and started searching. Her marketing job had made her skilled at online research, At tracking down information most people thought was private, she started with social media, searching for men named James in Portland, Oregon. Thousands of results. She narrowed it down. White men, ages 45-50, living in Portland. Still hundreds. She worked through the night, fueled by hotel coffee and adrenaline, clicking through Facebook profiles, LinkedIn pages, Instagram accounts. Nothing. No one who looked like her father. But then, if James had staged his disappearance, he wouldn't be using his real name, would he? By 3 a.m, Madison's eyes burned and her hands cramped from typing. She'd gotten nowhere. The rational part of her brain whispered that this was a fool's errand, that she'd seen a stranger who happened to resemble her father. The irrational part, the part that had spent 10 years with a hole in her chest where her father used to be, refused to listen. She called in sick to the conference Friday morning and went back to that street corner. In daylight, it looked different, less dreamlike. A coffee shop occupied the corner building. Its windows steamed with morning humidity. Madison went inside, ordered a latte she wouldn't drink, and asked the barista if she knew a family in the neighborhood. Man in his late 40s, woman, 2 young kids. The barista, a girl with purple hair and tired eyes, shrugged. That describes like half the neighborhood. This is Portland. Everyone's got kids in flannel. Madison showed her a photo on her phone. James from 2010. The last family picture they'd taken together. Have you seen this man? The barista squinted at the screen. I mean, maybe? He looks familiar, but I see a lot of faces. Sorry. Madison spent the day walking the surrounding blocks, asking shopkeepers, postal workers, anyone who might recognize her father. Most people looked at her like she was crazy. A few were sympathetic but unhelpful. One older man at a corner store studied James's photo for a long time before shaking his head. Can't say for sure, but there's a guy who comes in sometimes, looks a bit like him. Usually with his kids, buys them candy. But his name's not James. It's Michael, I think. Michael something. Michael. A common name. Easy to remember, easy to blend in with. Madison's pulse quickened. Do you know where he lives? Lady, I don't ask my customers for their addresses, that'd be weird. By Friday evening, Madison was exhausted and no closer to answers. She sat in her hotel room and finally called her brother. Tyler answered on the 4th ring, his voice groggy. Maddie? What's wrong? It's late. Are you home? I need to see you. Now. Something in her tone must have convinced him not to argue. He gave her his address, an apartment in the Hawthorne district, about 20 minutes from her hotel. Madison caught an Uber, watching the city lights blur past the window, rehearsing what she'd say. Tyler answered his door in sweatpants and a faded Radiohead t-shirt, his brown hair standing up in odd angles. At 23, he still looked boyish, though his eyes held the particular weariness of someone who'd learned too young that the world was cruel and random. His apartment was small but neat, decorated with minimalist furniture and gaming posters. You look terrible, Tyler said, studying her face. I saw him. Madison's voice came out flat, emotionless. I saw Dad, yesterday, walking down the street with a woman and 2 kids. Tyler's expression didn't change. He stepped aside to let her in, closed the door, and walked to his kitchen. He pulled 2 beers from the refrigerator, opened both, and handed her one before finally speaking. You're serious? Would I fly to your apartment at 10 o'clock at night if I wasn't serious? Tyler took a long drink of his beer. Okay, tell me everything. Madison recounted it all. The conference, the street corner, the moment of recognition that had felt like being struck by lightning. Tyler listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, silence hung between them like a physical presence. It could have been someone who looked like him, Tyler finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. It was him, Tyler. I know it was him. Then where the hell has he been for 10 years? Tyler's calm facade cracked, anger bleeding through. Why would he? If he's alive, if he just left us, why would he do that? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. They spent the next hour forming a plan. Tyler, as a software developer, had skills Madison lacked. He could access databases, run facial recognition searches, dig through digital records. Madison had the photograph, the street corner, the coffee shop. Together, they might actually find him. If we do find him, Tyler said quietly, if he really is alive, what then? Do we call the police? Do we confront him? Do we tell Mom? Madison thought about her mother, Claire, who'd spent 10 years rebuilding a life from ashes, who'd worked herself to exhaustion to keep their family afloat, who still wore her wedding ring even though her husband had been declared legally dead. Not yet. Not until we're absolutely sure. This would destroy her if we're wrong. Tyler nodded slowly. And if we're right, won't the truth destroy her anyway? They worked through the weekend. Tyler pulled up street view maps of the area where Madison had seen James, identifying all the residential buildings within a 6-block radius. Madison printed flyers with James's photo. Old photo, but it was all she had. And spent Saturday walking door to door, asking if anyone recognized him. Most people shut their doors quickly, wary of strangers with questions. But an elderly woman in a third-floor walk-up studied the photo carefully. "That's Michael Harper," she said. "Lives in the building across the street with his wife and children. Nice family. Quiet. Why are you looking for him?" "Michael Harper." Madison felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Are you sure his name is Michael?" "That's what's on the mailbox, dear. Is he in some kind of trouble?" Madison forced a smile. "No trouble. I just thought he looked like someone I used to know. Thank you." She texted Tyler immediately. "Found him. Michael Harper. Get everything you can on that name." By Sunday evening, Tyler had compiled a dossier that made Madison's blood run cold. Michael Harper had appeared in Portland in late 2010. No records before that. He'd purchased a house in the Hawthorne district in 2011, paying cash. He worked as a consultant for various tech companies. Always contract work, nothing permanent. He'd married a woman named Lisa Harper in 2012. Their daughter Emma was born in 2013, son Noah in 2016. "It's a completely fabricated identity," Tyler said, his voice tight. "Everything about Michael Harper started in 2010. Before that, nothing. He doesn't exist." "Because he was James Thornton," Madison whispered. The address was on their screen, 2847 S.E. Madison Street, a 2-story craftsman-style house with a blue door and a maple tree in the front yard. Google Street View showed a tidy property with children's toys visible in the yard. A normal house, a normal family, built on the grave of another family. "What do we do?" Tyler asked. Madison stared at the address, her father's new address, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "We confront him tomorrow. We go to that house and we get answers. And if he runs, then we call the police. We call Detective Walsh in Rockford. We blow his whole life apart." Madison's voice was steady now, the shock replaced by something sharper. "He doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to erase us and start over like we never existed." Monday morning dawned gray and wet, typical Portland weather that matched Madison's mood. She and Tyler met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the house on S.E. Madison Street. Neither of them had slept much. Madison had spent the night imagining this confrontation, scripting what she'd say, but every version ended with her screaming or crying or both. "We need to be smart about this," Tyler said, stirring sugar into his coffee with mechanical precision. "If we just show up and accuse him, he could call the cops on us. We're strangers to him now. Legally, Michael Harper has no connection to Madison and Tyler Thornton." The words hit Madison like a slap. He was right. To the world, to the law, James Thornton was dead. Michael Harper was a different person entirely. What they were planning was technically harassment, maybe worse. "I don't care," Madison said. "I need to look him in the eye. I need to hear him explain why he destroyed our lives." They walked to the house at 9:30, after the children would presumably be at school. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined streets with well-maintained homes, and Priuses in every driveway. Number 2847 looked peaceful, unthreatening. Madison's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. Tyler squeezed her hand. "You ready?" She wasn't. She never would be. But she walked up the path anyway and rang the doorbell. Footsteps inside. The door opened. And there he stood. James Thornton. Michael Harper. Her father. Older, with more gray in his hair and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 10 years ago. But unmistakably, undeniably him. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his head. He looked at Madison with polite curiosity, no recognition in his eyes. "Can I help you?" His voice. God, his voice was exactly the same. Madison couldn't speak. Her carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. She just stared at him. This man who'd read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike and then walked into a lake and never came back. Except he had come back. Just not to them. "Dad," Tyler said, his voice breaking on the word, and something changed in James's expression. The polite curiosity drained away, replaced by shock, then something that looked horribly like fear. His face went pale. His hand gripped the doorframe. "You need to leave," he said quickly. Right now. You have the wrong person. No. Madison found her voice and it came out hard, sharp. We don't. You're James Thornton. You're my father. And you've been alive this whole time. James, Michael, whoever he was, looked past them, checking the street, panic in his eyes. Please, you don't understand. You need to go. If she finds out? If who finds out? Madison demanded. Your new wife? The one you married while your first wife was still mourning you? A car pulled into the driveway. A silver SUV. A blonde woman got out, shopping bags in her hands, and walked toward them with a confused smile. Michael? Who are these people? James's face was ashen. He looked at Madison and Tyler with something that might have been desperation or guilt or both, and he made a choice. Lisa, go inside now. The woman, Lisa Harper, Madison's father's second wife, stopped walking. Her smile faded. What's going on? These are solicitors. I'm handling it. But Madison was done with his lies. She turned to Lisa Harper and said the words that would detonate everything. Your husband isn't Michael Harper. His real name is James Thornton. He faked his death in Illinois 10 years ago and abandoned his wife and 2 children. We're those children, and we want to know why. The silence that followed Madison's words was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of autumn leaves skittering across the pavement. Lisa Harper stood frozen on her driveway, shopping bags dangling from her hands, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. James, Michael, whoever he was, looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. That's insane, Lisa finally said, her voice high and thin. Michael, what is she talking about? Tell them they're crazy. But James didn't speak. He just stood there, his face the color of old newspaper, his eyes locked on Madison's with an expression she couldn't read. Shame, fear, regret, maybe all 3. Michael, Lisa's voice cracked. Say something. Tyler pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and held up a photograph, the last family photo they'd taken. All 4 Thorntons together at Madison's 8th grade graduation. This is our father, James Thornton, Rockford, Illinois. He disappeared October 14th, 2010. The police think he drowned himself in Pierce Lake. He looked at the man in the doorway. But he didn't drown, did he? He ran. Lisa's shopping bags hit the ground. Apples rolled across the driveway. This is a mistake. My husband's name is Michael Harper. We've been married 8 years. We have children together. I would know if... Would you? Madison's voice cut through Lisa's protest like a blade. What do you actually know about Michael Harper's life before 2010? Does he have family, old friends, a history? Lisa's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to James, searching his face for reassurance that never came. He said his parents died when he was young, that he didn't have siblings, that he moved to Portland for a fresh start after a difficult divorce. There was no divorce, Madison said. There was a wife named Claire Thornton who spent 10 years thinking her husband was dead, who worked herself into exhaustion raising 2 kids alone, who still wears her wedding ring because she never got closure. Her voice was rising now, tears streaming down her face, though she barely noticed. There was a daughter who graduated high school without her father there, a son who stopped talking about him because it hurt too much, a family that fell apart because you, she pointed at James, her finger trembling. You chose to destroy us. James finally moved. He stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind him, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Lisa, take the groceries inside. I need to talk to these people alone. Like hell, I'm going inside. Lisa's shock was transforming into fury. If what they're saying is true, if you lied to me about who you are, I deserve to hear this. Please. James's voice broke. The kids will be home from school soon. They can't. Emma and Noah can't see this. The mention of the other children, his new children, his replacement children, sent a fresh wave of rage through Madison. What about us? We were kids too. We were your kids first. Didn't we deserve better than finding your shoes on a dock and spending a decade wondering why we weren't enough to make you stay? A neighbor across the street had emerged from her house, watching the scene with undisguised curiosity. James noticed and his jaw tightened. Not here. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks away, corner of Hawthorne and 32nd. Meet me there in 20 minutes. I'll explain everything. You'll run, Tyler said flatly. That's what you do, you run. I'm not running. James looked at his son, really looked at him for the first time, and something in his expression crumbled. I owe you the truth, both of you. Just give me 20 minutes to talk to Lisa, to figure out what to tell Emma and Noah. Please. Madison wanted to refuse, wanted to drag him to a police station, Wanted to call her mother right now and put James on the phone to explain the inexplicable. But she saw the neighbor filming them on her phone now, and she understood. Whatever happened next, it couldn't happen here on this suburban street in front of James's, Michael's, whatever his name was, in front of his new family. 20 minutes, Madison said. If you're not there, we're calling the Rockford Police Department and telling them everything. James nodded and went back inside. Through the window, Madison could see Lisa following him, her body language radiating betrayal and rage. Raised voices filtered through the walls, indistinct but clearly anguished. Madison and Tyler walked to the coffee shop in silence. The place was small and hipster-ish, all reclaimed wood and vintage Edison bulbs, half full with people typing on MacBooks and nursing expensive lattes. They chose a table in the back corner and waited. Madison kept checking her phone. 15 minutes. 18. 22. He's not coming, Tyler muttered. We should call the police now. But at 24 minutes, James walked through the door. He looked 10 years older than he had half an hour ago. His face haggard, his shoulders slumped. He got a black coffee at the counter and sat down across from them without meeting their eyes. Lisa threw me out, he said quietly. She wants a divorce. She's calling a lawyer. She said I'm not allowed near the kids until she figures out who I really am. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I don't blame her. I wouldn't trust me either. We don't want your sob story, Madison said coldly. We want the truth, all of it. Why did you leave? Where have you been? How could you do this to us? James wrapped both hands around his coffee cup like he was trying to draw warmth from it. He stared into the dark liquid for a long moment before speaking. I was drowning, he finally said. Not in the lake. In debt. In lies. In a life I'd built on a foundation of mistakes I didn't know how to fix. That's not an answer, Tyler said. I know, but it's where it started. James took a shaky breath. In 2008, the economy crashed. You remember. Everyone lost money. The company I worked for started laying people off. I was terrified I'd be next, that I wouldn't be able to provide for you all. So he paused, shame flooding his face. I made some investments, risky ones. Day trading, options, things I didn't really understand but that promised huge returns. At first I won, made back what we'd lost and more. I felt like a genius. Madison felt sick. She remembered 2008, remembered her parents arguing in hushed voices about money, remembered her mother looking stressed and her father insisting everything would be fine. Then I started losing. James continued. Bad. I lost my initial investment. Then I lost more trying to win it back. Classic gambler's fallacy. I took out a second mortgage on the house without telling your mother. Maxed out credit cards. Took loans from people you don't want to owe money to. His hands trembled around the coffee cup. By 2010, I was $400,000 in debt. The house was weeks from foreclosure. And these people I'd borrowed from, they weren't banks, they were making threats. Against me, against your mother, against you kids. Tyler stared at him. So you ran? You faked your death instead of declaring bankruptcy like a normal person? It wasn't that simple. The people I owed money to, they don't care about bankruptcy. They wanted their money, or they wanted blood. They'd already sent someone to my office to deliver a message. James pulled up his shirt, revealing a long scar along his ribs. This was the message. They said next time it would be worse. Next time it might be Claire or one of you kids. Madison felt her anger waver, confusion creeping in. So you, what? You did this to protect us? Don't. James's voice turned sharp. Don't make me into a hero. I'm not. Yes, I was trying to protect you from the consequences of my stupidity, but I was also a coward. I was ashamed. I couldn't face your mother, couldn't admit what I'd done. Running seemed easier than staying and watching our family lose everything. Who helped you? Tyler asked. You couldn't have faked your death alone. Someone had to help you disappear. James was quiet for a long moment. Rick Martinez. The name hit Madison like a physical blow. Rick Martinez. Her father's best friend since college. The man who'd been Tyler's godfather, who'd come to their house for barbecues and football games, who'd been at the search site at Pierce Lake, comforting Claire while the divers looked for James's body. Uncle Rick knew. Madison's voice came out as a whisper. He owed me. Years ago, I'd covered for him on something that would have cost him his marriage and his job. When I told him what I was planning, he said he'd help on one condition. I could never contact any of you again. Ever. He said if I really wanted to protect my family, I had to stay dead. No checking in, no letters, nothing. A clean break. Jesus Christ, Tyler muttered. Rick got me fake documents, driver's license, social security number, birth certificate. Michael Harper. He said he knew people who could create an identity that would hold up under scrutiny. It cost $50,000, money I didn't have, so he paid for it. Said I could consider us even. James's voice was hollow. The morning of October 14th, I drove to the lake like I was going to work. Rick met me there. I left my phone, my wallet, my shoes, everything that would make it look real. He drove me to Chicago, put me on a bus to Seattle. From there, I made my way to Portland. And just started a new life, Madison said. While we thought you were dead. I worked construction at first. Cash jobs under the table. Lived in a rooming house that rented by the week. It was hell. I was alone, broke, miserable. But at least you were safe. The people I owed money to, they declared the debt void when I died. Claire was protected. You kids were protected. That's all I cared about. Bullshit, Tyler snapped. If that was all you cared about, you wouldn't have married Lisa, you wouldn't have had more kids. You would have stayed miserable and alone like you deserved. James flinched. You're right. I should have. But Lisa, I met her in 2011. She was a server at a restaurant where I ate sometimes. She was kind to me. We started talking. She didn't know anything about my past because I didn't have a past as Michael Harper. She saw me as this quiet, hard-working guy who'd had some bad luck. We fell in love. Or I fell in love. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to stop hurting. So you started over, Madison said. New wife, new kids, new life, while your old family grieved. I thought about you every day. James's eyes filled with tears. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. I wanted to call so many times, to explain, to apologize, to hear your voices, but I'd made a promise to Rick. And what would I even say? Sorry I abandoned you, but I was a coward and a criminal, and this seemed easier than facing the consequences. That would have been a start, Madison said coldly. Instead, you let us think you killed yourself. Do you have any idea what that does to people? Mom blamed herself. She thought maybe if she'd been a better wife, if she'd noticed you were depressed, if she'd said the right thing that morning, maybe you wouldn't have done it. Tyler stopped talking about you entirely. I spent a decade in therapy trying to understand why I wasn't enough to make my father want to live. Madison, don't. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. You don't get to say my name, you don't get to apologize. You made your choice 10 years ago. You chose the easy lie over the hard truth. You chose yourself over us. James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. What happens now? He asked quietly. Are you going to the police? Tyler stood too. That depends. Did you commit any actual crimes or just fraud and identity theft and abandonment? The debts are gone. The people I owed money to think I'm dead, which means they've written off the debt. As for identity fraud, James shrugged helplessly. I suppose I've been living as someone else for 10 years. I filed taxes under Michael Harper's social security number. Got a passport in that name. I don't know what the legal ramifications are. We'll figure it out, Madison said. But first, you're going to call Mom. You're going to tell her everything you just told us. You're going to give her the closure you stole from her 10 years ago. She'll hate me. She already hates you, Tyler said. Or she hates the memory of you. But at least she'll finally know the truth. James nodded slowly. Okay, I'll call her. But Madison, Tyler, I need you to understand something. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped being your father, even when I couldn't be in your lives. What I did was unforgivable. But it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I cared too much and handled it in the worst possible way. Madison felt tears burning in her eyes again. But she refused to let them fall. You want forgiveness? You want understanding? You don't get that, not from me, not yet, maybe not ever. All you get is a phone call to Mom and a chance to explain yourself to the police if it comes to that. She walked out of the coffee shop, Tyler following close behind. Behind them, James sat alone at the table, his untouched coffee growing cold, the weight of 10 years of lies finally crushing down on him. Outside, Madison pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She pulled up her mother's contact and stared at it for a long moment. Are you really going to call her now? Tyler asked. Shouldn't we, I don't know, figure out what to say first? We shouldn't say anything, Madison replied. He should, he owes her that much. She dialed her mother's number and waited for her to answer, her heart pounding. Madison? Honey, is everything okay? Madison's voice caught. Mom, I need you to sit down. Something happened. Something. You're not going to believe it, but I need you to trust me. Can you sit down? You're scaring me. What's wrong? Mom. Madison took a deep breath, looked back at the coffee shop where her father, her alive father, sat drowning in his own guilt. Dad's not dead. He's alive. I found him, and he has a lot of explaining to do. The line went silent. Then, barely above a whisper, "What?" "He's alive, Mom. He faked his death. He's been living in Portland this whole time. And he's right here. He wants to talk to you. He wants to explain." Another long silence. Then Claire Thornton's voice, cold and hard in a way Madison had never heard before. "Put him on the phone. Now." Madison walked back into the coffee shop and placed her phone on the table in front of James. His eyes went wide with something between hope and terror as he stared at the device like it might explode. "She wants to talk to you," Madison said flatly. "Now." James's hand trembled as he reached for the phone. He lifted it to his ear, his face pale, his breathing shallow. "Claire?" Madison and Tyler couldn't hear their mother's response, but they watched their father's face crumble. Whatever Claire was saying, it was tearing him apart. His eyes squeezed shut. Tears streamed down his cheeks. His free hand gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. "I know," he whispered into the phone. "I know. Claire, I'm so sorry, He stopped, listening. Yes, I understand. I deserve that. I deserve all of it." Another long pause. "No, there's no excuse. Nothing I say will make this better. I was a coward. I was selfish. I destroyed everything and I can never—" His voice broke completely. The conversation lasted 15 minutes. James barely spoke, just listened to whatever Claire was saying, his face a mask of anguish. Finally, he said quietly, "I'll do whatever you want. If you want me to turn myself in, I will. If you want me to disappear again, I'll do that too. If you want to see me, to scream at me in person, I'll get on a plane tonight, whatever you need." A pause. "Okay. Yes, I'll wait to hear from you. Claire, I love you. I never stopped—" He stopped abruptly, stared at the phone. She hung up. He set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Madison felt a confusing mix of satisfaction and discomfort watching her father fall apart. She'd wanted this, wanted him to hurt the way they'd hurt, but seeing it happen felt less cathartic than she'd imagined. Tyler picked up the phone, checked to make sure their mother had actually ended the call. "What did she say?" James wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "She said she spent 10 years grieving a man who didn't exist, that she'd finally started to heal, to move forward, and now I destroyed even that by proving she was right to doubt herself, right to wonder if she'd somehow driven me away." His voice was hoarse. "She said the cruelest thing I could have done was die, and the second cruelest thing was not actually dying. She said she needs time to process this, to decide what happens next. She'll call you tomorrow." "What about the police?" Madison asked. "She said that's up to me. If I want to confess, confess. If I want to run again, run. She's done making decisions for me." James looked up at his children, his first children, the ones he'd abandoned. "What do you think I should do?" "I think," Tyler said slowly, "you should talk to a lawyer before you talk to the police, because what you did, the fake identity, the fraud, whatever debts you skipped out on, that's all criminal. You could go to prison. Maybe I should." "Jesus, don't martyr yourself now," Madison snapped. "You want to go to prison? Fine. But think about Lisa and Emma and Noah. You've already destroyed one family. You really want to traumatize the second one by having their father arrested?" James looked stricken. "What am I supposed to do? There's no good option here. Every choice hurts someone. Welcome to the consequences of your actions," Madison said coldly. "You should have thought about that 10 years ago." They sat in tense silence for a moment. The coffee shop had filled up with the lunch crowd, people chattering about mundane things, oblivious to the life-altering drama playing out in the corner. Madison's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Are you okay? Is Tyler with you?" Madison typed back. "We're together. We're okay. I'm so sorry, Mom." The response came quickly. "Not your fault. None of this is your fault. I love you both so much." Madison showed Tyler the message. He read it and closed his eyes briefly. "We should go home, back to Rockford. Mom shouldn't be alone right now." "You're leaving?" James asked, panic creeping into his voice. "What did you think would happen?" Madison stood, shoving her phone into her pocket. "That we'd all have coffee and catch up and pretend the last 10 years didn't happen? You're not our father anymore. You're just a stranger who used to be someone we loved." "Madison, please." "No." She cut him off. "You don't get to please me. You don't get to ask anything of us. We found you. We gave you a chance to explain. That's more than you deserved. What you do now, whether you turn yourself in, whether you try to salvage your marriage to Lisa, whether you finally grow a spine and face your mistakes, that's your problem, not ours." Tyler stood too. If the police want to talk to us, we'll tell them everything. If Mom wants to press charges, we'll support her, but we're done here. We're done with you. They walked toward the exit. James called after them. Wait, can I have your numbers? Can I call you sometime? Can we try to... Madison turned back. Try to what? Have a relationship? Be a family again? That's not happening. You made sure of that when you left your shoes on a dock and walked away. Goodbye, James. Outside, the Portland rain had returned, heavier now, soaking them within seconds. They walked back toward Madison's hotel in silence, both processing the surreal nightmare their lives had become. Finally, Tyler spoke. Do you think Mom will ever forgive him? I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. He said he did it to protect us, to keep us safe from the people he owed money to. He did it to protect himself, Madison corrected, from consequences, from shame, from having to admit he'd screwed up. If he really wanted to protect us, he would have gone to the police, gotten into witness protection or something. He would have found a way to stay in our lives. He chose the easy lie instead. Tyler kicked at a puddle. What do we do now? We go home. We help Mom deal with this. And then, Madison trailed off. She didn't know what came after. And then, how did you process discovering your dead father was alive? How did you integrate that information into the narrative you'd built of your life? They spent the rest of the day making arrangements. Madison changed her flight to leave that evening. Tyler called his boss and requested emergency leave. By 6 p.m., they were at Portland International Airport, waiting to board a flight to Chicago. Madison kept checking her phone, half expecting a call from James, but nothing came. The flight was turbulent, matching Madison's emotional state. She stared out the window at the dark clouds and tried to make sense of everything. Her father was alive. He'd built a new life, had a new family, and had successfully erased them for a decade. And the worst part, the part that kept circling in her brain like a shark, was that he'd done it all deliberately. Every day for 10 years, he'd woken up and chosen not to contact them, chosen to let them grieve, chosen his new life over his old one. They landed in Chicago at midnight and drove the 90 miles to Rockford in Tyler's rental car, arriving at their childhood home at almost 2 in the morning. The lights were on. Claire was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at nothing. She looked up when they came in, and Madison was shocked by her mother's appearance. Claire had aged 10 years in a single day. Her face was haggard, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she set down her cup. "Mom," Madison whispered, and then they were both crying, holding each other while Tyler stood awkwardly in the doorway before finally joining the embrace. They sat up until dawn, talking in fractured sentences about what had happened. Claire wanted every detail. What James looked like now, what his new house looked like, what his new wife was like, what his new children looked like. Each answer seemed to hurt her more. Were they happy? Claire finally asked. James and his new family. Did they look happy? Madison didn't want to answer, but she owed her mother honesty. Yeah, Mom. They looked happy. Claire nodded slowly, fresh tears streaming down her face. Good. That's good. I'm glad someone got to be happy while I was working double shifts to keep our house and Madison was in therapy and Tyler was so depressed I was afraid he'd... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. What do you want to do? Tyler asked gently. Do you want to press charges? We can go to the police tomorrow. I don't know, Claire whispered. Part of me wants him to suffer the way we suffered. But another part. She looked at her children. He's still your father. If he goes to prison, if his life gets destroyed, that affects you too. People will know. The story will get out. Local man fakes death, abandons family. It'll follow you forever. It's already going to follow us, Madison said. Whether he goes to prison or not, this is our life now. We're the family that got left behind. Claire was quiet for a long moment. I need to talk to Detective Walsh. He worked the case. He deserves to know what really happened. After that, she shrugged helplessly. I don't know. I can't think that far ahead right now. The next morning, they drove to the Rockford Police Department. Detective Walsh was retired now, but they tracked him down at his home, a small ranch house on the west side of town. He answered the door in a cardigan and slippers, his hair completely white now, and the moment he saw Claire, his face filled with sympathy. Mrs. Thornton, is everything all right? Can we come in, Detective? We need to talk about my husband's case. Walsh led them to his living room, furnished with worn but comfortable furniture and photographs of grandchildren on every surface. He offered coffee, which everyone accepted just to have something to do with their hands. Then Claire told him everything. Walsh's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger as the story unfolded. When Claire finished, he sat back in his chair and ran a hand over his face. Jesus Christ, I spent months on that case. We dragged the lake 4 times. We had divers in the water for weeks. We interviewed everyone who knew him, and it was all a setup. I'm sorry, Claire said. I know you did everything you could. It's not your fault, Mrs. Thornton. It's his. Walsh's jaw tightened. And Rick Martinez. He helped fake this? He was there at the search site, comforting you while we looked for a body he knew we'd never find. That son of a... He stopped himself, glanced at Madison and Tyler. Sorry, but that's criminal. Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false police report, identity theft, probably a dozen other charges. What happens if we report this? Madison asked. Walsh considered. Federal and state charges most likely. James would be looking at significant prison time. Rick too. The problem is jurisdiction. James has been living in Oregon under a false identity. That's federal. But the fake death happened here in Illinois. It'd be a mess of competing jurisdictions and legal wrangling. Would Claire face any consequences? Tyler asked. For the life insurance claim or anything? No. She filed that claim in good faith. She's a victim here. Walsh looked at Claire with genuine compassion. I have to ask, do you want to pursue this? Once I make a report, it's out of your hands. The state might prosecute even if you don't want them to. Claire stared into her coffee cup. I keep thinking about his new children. Emma and Noah. They're 6 and 4 years old. They didn't do anything wrong. If their father goes to prison, their lives get destroyed too. Mom, that's not your responsibility, Madison said firmly. James should have thought about that before he committed fraud and abandoned us. I know, but I can't stop thinking about them. Claire looked up at Walsh. Can I have some time? To decide what I want to do? Walsh nodded slowly. Take a few days. Think it over. But Mrs. Thornton, I need to be honest with you. Once this story gets out, and it will get out, there's going to be pressure to prosecute. The DA won't like looking soft on someone who made fools of the police department for 10 years. They left Walsh's house with no clear plan, just a ticking clock before the decision was made for them. As they drove back home, Madison's phone rang. Unknown Oregon number. She answered, already knowing who it would be. Madison? James's voice was rough, like he'd been crying. I need to tell you something, Rick Martinez. He's dead. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. So he can't corroborate anything I told you. And he can't face charges for helping me. It's just me now. Just me left to pay for what we did. Madison felt the words land like stones. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. Because if you go to the police, I'm the only one who'll go down for this, and because... He paused. Because I talked to a lawyer this morning. He said I should turn myself in, cooperate fully, hope for leniency. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm calling the Portland police today and telling them everything. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. What about Lisa, Emma, and Noah? Lisa's filing for divorce. She's already moved out, taken the kids to her sister's place. I'm not allowed contact until the legal situation is resolved. Emma asked why Daddy couldn't come with them. I didn't know what to say. His voice broke. I'm losing another family, and this time it's exactly what I deserve. Madison should have felt victorious. James was finally facing consequences, but instead, she just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of hurt, tired of the whole nightmare. What do you want from me, James? Forgiveness? Permission? What? Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm not running anymore. Whatever happens, I'm staying and facing it. It's 10 years too late, but it's all I can do now. He hung up before Madison could respond. She relayed the conversation to her mother and Tyler, and they drove the rest of the way home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about justice, forgiveness, and the price of a decade of lies. 3 days after James's call, the story broke. Someone, a neighbor, a friend of Lisa's, maybe even someone from the Portland Police Department, leaked it to the media, and suddenly the Thornton family's private nightmare became national news. Man fakes death, abandons family, builds new life, screamed the headlines. Cable news picked it up. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Social media exploded with opinions. Everyone an expert on what James should have done, what Claire should do now, whether Madison and Tyler were justified in their anger or should be more forgiving. The reporters descended on Rockford like locusts. They camped outside the Thornton house, shoving microphones and cameras in their faces every time they tried to leave. They tracked down Madison's co-workers, Tyler's friends, anyone who might provide a quote or an angle. They dug up old photos from Facebook. James at Madison's high school graduation, at Tyler's 13th birthday party. Smiling family pictures that now looked sinister with the knowledge of what came after. Claire stopped going to work. The hospital administration suggested she take a leave of absence until things settled down, which was corporate speak for, "You're too much of a liability right now." Madison's company was more understanding, but she could feel the whispers, the sideways glances from colleagues who'd seen the news. Tyler, safely in Oregon, had it slightly easier, but even he reported that coworkers who'd never spoken to him before suddenly had questions about his situation. The legal machinery ground forward with cold efficiency. James turned himself in to Portland authorities as he'd promised, and was charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and filing false police reports. The Rockford DA's office announced they were pursuing additional charges related to the staged disappearance. Rick Martinez's widow, blindsided by revelations that her husband had been complicit in an elaborate fraud, released a statement through her lawyer denying any knowledge of her husband's involvement and threatening to sue anyone who suggested otherwise. James's new family, or former family depending on how you looked at it, became collateral damage. Lisa Harper's Facebook page was flooded with vitriol from strangers calling her stupid for not seeing through James's lies, with others defending her as another victim of his deception. Someone posted photos of Emma and Noah from Lisa's private Instagram account, forcing her to delete all her social media and move the children to an undisclosed location. Madison saw one of those photos before they were taken down, a little girl with James's gray eyes smiling at the camera without any idea that her entire world was imploding. The guilt Madison felt surprised her. She hadn't asked for any of this, but she'd set it in motion by confronting James on his doorstep. The Portland district attorney offered James a plea deal: plead guilty to all charges, cooperate fully with investigators, receive a reduced sentence of 5 to 7 years. His lawyer advised him to take it. A trial would be expensive, public, and given the evidence and public sentiment, almost certainly end in conviction with a much longer sentence. James signed the papers without hesitation. "He's not even fighting it," Claire said when Detective Walsh called with the update. She sat at the kitchen table, the same spot she'd occupied for most of the past week, surrounded by untouched food that neighbors and friends had dropped off. "He's just giving up. Maybe that's the only decent thing he's done in 10 years, Madison said. She was home from Chicago for the week, unable to focus on work anyway. The plan had been to support her mother, but truthfully, they were supporting each other, both trying to navigate this bizarre new reality. Tyler called every day from Portland, but he refused to come back to Rockford. "I can't handle the reporters," he admitted during one call. "I can't handle people staring at me like I'm some kind of victim in a Lifetime movie. Out here, I'm just another software developer. Nobody knows. That's not going to last," Madison warned. "Your name is all over the news. Someone at your work will make the connection eventually. Then I'll deal with it then, but I'm not coming back there. Not now." Madison understood. Part of her wanted to run too, to disappear to some place where nobody knew the Thornton name, but her mother needed her, and despite everything, despite the anger and betrayal, Madison couldn't abandon Claire, not the way James had. The psychological toll was harder to quantify than the legal consequences. Claire's therapist, Dr. Patterson, whom she'd seen on and off since 2010, told her this was a unique form of trauma. Ambiguous loss, she called it, but in reverse. For 10 years, Claire had grieved James as dead. She'd progressed through all the stages, had finally reached something resembling acceptance. Now she had to grieve all over again, but for something different. Not the loss of her husband to death, but the loss of the man she'd thought he was. The realization that her entire marriage, everything she'd believed about the person she'd spent 15 years with, had been at least partially a lie. "He was drowning in debt and I had no idea," Claire said to Madison one night, both of them sitting in the dark living room unable to sleep. "I was his wife. I shared a bed with him, raised children with him, built a life with him. How did I not know? What does that say about me?" "It says he was good at lying," Madison replied. "It says he hid things because he was ashamed and scared. It doesn't say anything about you except that you trusted your husband, which is what you're supposed to do. But I keep thinking, were there signs? Things I should have noticed. He was distant sometimes, distracted. He worked late a lot. I thought it was just work stress. What if I'd pushed harder, asked more questions? Could I have stopped him from leaving?" "Mom, no." Madison grabbed her mother's hand in the darkness. "You can't blame yourself for not anticipating that your husband would fake his death. That's not a normal thing that people do. That's not something you prepare for or watch out for. But Claire wasn't convinced, and Madison understood why. It was easier to blame yourself than to accept that someone you loved was capable of such calculated cruelty. Self-blame gave you control, suggested that if you'd just done something differently, the outcome would have changed. Accepting that James had made his choice independent of anything Claire did or didn't do meant accepting powerlessness, and that was harder. Madison's own therapy sessions, which had been monthly maintenance appointments for the past few years, became weekly intensive sessions. Dr. Reeves, her psychologist, helped her process the complicated emotions: relief that her father hadn't killed himself, anger that he'd let them think he had, grief for the relationship they'd never get back, and a strange, unwelcome empathy for the desperate man who'd made such a catastrophically bad decision. "It's okay to have mixed feelings," Dr. Reeves told her. "You can be angry at your father and still understand why he did what he did. You can acknowledge his suffering while also maintaining that his actions were unforgivable. Humans are complex. Situations are complex. You don't have to resolve all these feelings into one neat emotion." But Madison wanted neat emotions. She wanted to hate James purely and completely, without the complications of understanding or empathy. She wanted the simple narrative: bad man abandons good family, gets punished, the end. Instead, she got the messy truth. Desperate man makes terrible choice, destroys two families, including his own new one, and everyone suffers consequences. 6 weeks after the confrontation in Portland, James was sentenced. The plea deal held 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release afterward. At the sentencing hearing, which Madison and Claire attended via Zoom, neither could stomach going to Portland. James read a prepared statement. "I have no excuse for what I did," he said, his voice steady but hollow. "I was facing financial ruin and threats to my family, and instead of handling it like an adult, I ran. I chose the cowardly path, and in doing so, I inflicted immeasurable pain on people I loved. My wife Claire, my children Madison and Tyler, my parents, my friends. They all grieved a death that never happened. They suffered because I was too ashamed to face my mistakes. No prison sentence can make up for what I took from them. No apology can repair the damage I've caused." He paused, his eyes finding the camera as if he could see Claire and Madison through it. "To my first family, I'm sorry. Those words are insufficient, but they're all I have. I hope someday you can find peace, even if you never find forgiveness. To my second family, to Lisa, Emma, and Noah, I'm sorry for deceiving you, for building our life on a foundation of lies. You deserved better. You deserved the truth." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornhill, was unimpressed by James's contrition. "Mr. Thornton, or Mr. Harper, or whoever you actually are," she said, "your actions show a level of selfishness and disregard for others that is truly staggering. You didn't just fake your death. You weaponized grief. You turned your family's love for you into a weapon against them. While I'm bound by the plea agreement to impose the recommended sentence, I want to be clear. If I had my way, you'd spend far longer behind bars. 5 years is a gift you don't deserve." After the sentencing, Claire turned off her laptop and sat in silence for a long time. Madison waited, not sure what to say or do. Finally, Claire spoke. "It's done. He's going to prison. We got justice, I suppose." She didn't sound satisfied, she sounded exhausted. "So why don't I feel better?" "Because prison doesn't fix what he broke," Madison said quietly. "It doesn't give us back those 10 years. It doesn't answer all the questions, it's just an ending. Not the ending we wanted, but an ending." Over the following months, life slowly, painfully returned to a new version of normal. The reporters moved on to other stories. The social media frenzy died down. Claire returned to work, though she transferred to a different floor at the hospital to escape the pitying looks from former colleagues. Madison threw herself into her career with renewed intensity, earning another promotion and deliberately taking assignments that kept her busy, kept her mind occupied. Tyler stayed in Oregon, started dating a woman he met through work, and slowly began talking about his father again in therapy. Small steps toward processing a trauma that had no easy resolution. James's parents, who'd spent 10 years grieving their son, now had to reckon with the knowledge that he was alive but imprisoned. His mother never recovered. She died 8 months after his sentencing, and James was denied permission to attend her funeral. His father, devastated by both losses, moved into an assisted living facility and cut off all contact with James. "I don't have a son anymore," he told Claire in their final phone call. The boy I raised wouldn't have done what he did, so whoever that man in prison is, he's not my son. Lisa Harper quietly divorced James and moved to California with the children. She changed their last names, enrolled them in new schools, and built a life far away from the scandal. Madison saw an interview she gave to a local news station once, her face pixelated for privacy. I feel like I was married to a stranger. Everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. I'm starting over, and I'm teaching my children that sometimes people you trust can betray you in unimaginable ways. But you survive. You have to. 2 years into James's sentence, Madison received a letter. It was forwarded through her lawyer. James wasn't allowed to contact them directly, but his lawyer had negotiated permission to send letters through intermediaries. Madison stared at the envelope for 3 days before opening it. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, James's familiar slanted script filling every line. He didn't ask for forgiveness or make excuses. Instead, he told stories. Memories of Madison as a little girl, how she'd insisted on wearing her Halloween costume for a month after Halloween, how Tyler used to collect rocks and give them names, how Claire hummed while she cooked dinner, not aware she was doing it. Small, specific memories that proved he'd been there. He'd been present, even if he'd ultimately left. At the end, he wrote, "I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect anything from you. But I needed you to know that those years were real for me. My love for you was real. The man I was then, the father I was then, he was real, even if he was also flawed and cowardly and ultimately not strong enough to do the right thing. You deserved a better father. I wish I had been him. I'm sorry I wasn't. I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry. Love, Dad." Madison read the letter 3 times, then put it away in a drawer. She didn't respond. She didn't show it to Tyler or her mother. She just kept it, a piece of evidence that James Thornton had existed, had loved them, and had made a choice that destroyed everything anyway. 3 years after the Portland confrontation, Madison got married. She met Derek at a marketing conference. Ironically, not unlike the conference that had led her to Portland. He was kind, stable, and painfully honest about everything, sometimes to a fault. "I can't be with someone who keeps secrets," Madison had told him early in their relationship, and he'd accepted that, understanding why trust was non-negotiable for her. Claire walked Madison down the aisle, both of them crying for complicated reasons. Tyler was the man of honor, having flown in from Portland with his girlfriend Sarah. The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends. There was an empty chair at the reception, not for James. Neither Madison nor Claire wanted to acknowledge his absence, but for Claire's father, Madison's grandfather, who'd passed away the year before. During the father-daughter dance, a tradition Madison had considered skipping, she danced with her uncle Mike, Claire's brother, who'd stepped up in countless ways over the past decade. As they swayed to an old jazz song, Mike said quietly, "Your dad would have been proud of the woman you've become. The real one. The one who was there when you were growing up. That man loved you. What he did later doesn't erase that." Madison nodded, unable to speak, because that was the hardest truth to accept, that James Thornton had been both a loving father and a man who'd abandoned his family. That both things could be true simultaneously. That love and betrayal weren't opposites but could coexist in the same person, the same relationship, the same history. 5 years after his sentencing, James was released from prison. Madison learned about it from a news alert on her phone. She stared at the notification. James Thornton released after serving full sentence for faking death. There was a photo. James walking out of a federal facility, looking older and thinner, his hair completely gray now. He was 53 years old, the age Madison had always imagined him being as a grandfather to her future children. He moved to a halfway house in Portland, got a job in construction, back where he'd started after fleeing Illinois. His parole officer told the media he was a model parolee, quiet, compliant, attending all his therapy sessions and check-ins. He didn't try to contact Madison, Tyler, or Claire, abiding by the restraining order Claire had filed to prevent any unwanted communication. But 6 months after his release, Madison's doorbell rang. She was home alone. Derek was at work. They didn't have kids yet. And when she looked through the peephole, her breath caught. James stood on her doorstep, holding a small package. He looked nervous, almost frightened, his hands trembling slightly. He'd lost weight in prison, his face gaunt, but his eyes were the same gray-blue she remembered. Madison opened the door but didn't invite him in. "You're violating the restraining order." "I know, I'll leave. I needed to give you this." He held out the package. It's your grandmother's ring, my mother's ring. She wanted you to have it. She told me before she died, but I couldn't get it to you before. Her lawyer recently sent it to me. I thought you should have it." Madison stared at the package but didn't take it. "You could have mailed it." "I could have, but I wanted to see you. Just for a moment. To know you're okay. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to forgive me. I just needed to see that you're living your life, that you survived what I did to you." "I'm surviving," Madison said coldly. "No thanks to you." "I know." James set the package down on the doorstep. "I'll go. I won't bother you again. But Madison, I need you to know something. What I said in that coffee shop in Portland, it was all true. I did it because I was afraid and ashamed and drowning in debt. But there's something I didn't tell you. Something I've never told anyone." Madison wanted to close the door, to end this conversation before it went somewhere she couldn't come back from. But curiosity, or maybe some lingering thread of connection to this man who'd shaped her childhood, held her in place. "What? The people I owed money to? They didn't just threaten me. They knew where Madison went to school. They knew Tyler's soccer schedule. They showed me photos of you kids, said it would be easy to make you disappear if I didn't pay up. And I believed them. Maybe I was naive. Maybe they were just trying to scare me, but I believed them." His voice broke. "So when I left, when I staged my death, it wasn't just about running from my problems. It was about taking the target off your backs, making them think I was dead so they'd write off the debt and leave you alone. That still doesn't make it right," Madison said, but her voice wavered. "I know. There was no right answer. But I want you to understand I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I loved you and I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. I was wrong. I should have gone to the police, should have asked for help, should have trusted that there was another way. But I didn't, and I'll regret that until the day I die." Tears streamed down Madison's face. She hated that she was crying, hated that his words affected her, hated that some small part of her wanted to believe he'd been trying to protect them. "You should go." James nodded. "Thank you for listening. That's more than I deserved." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. I heard you got married. Congratulations. I hope he treats you the way you deserve to be treated. I hope you're happy." He walked down the driveway and got into an old truck, driving away without looking back. Madison stood in her doorway, watching until the truck disappeared around the corner. Then she picked up the package, went inside, and opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small diamond, her grandmother's engagement ring, and beneath it, a letter from her grandmother, written shortly before she died. "Dear Madison," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and your father has finally done the right thing by giving you this ring. I won't tell you to forgive him, that's your choice, and whatever you decide, I support you. But I will tell you this, people are complicated. Your father made a terrible mistake, but he wasn't a terrible person. He was scared and foolish and made the worst possible choice in an impossible situation. That doesn't excuse what he did, but maybe someday you can remember that he was human, flawed and broken just like all of us. You don't have to forgive him, but don't let hatred poison the rest of your life. You deserve better than that. Love always, Grandma Rose." Madison sat on her couch holding the ring and the letter, crying for the grandmother she'd lost, for the father she'd lost twice, for the family that had been shattered and could never be fully repaired. When Derek came home, he found her like that, and held her while she sobbed, not asking questions, just being present in the way she needed. That night, Madison did something she hadn't done since Portland. She called Tyler. "I saw him," she said when he answered. "Dad, he came to my house." Tyler was silent for a long moment. "What did he say?" Madison told him everything. The ring, the letter, James's explanation about the threats to their safety. When she finished, Tyler sighed heavily. "Do you believe him about the threats?" "I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter?" "I guess not. He still left. He still let us think he was dead. He still chose the easy way out instead of fighting for us." Tyler paused. "But Madison, I've been thinking, what if we'd been in his position? What if we had kids and someone threatened them and we thought faking our deaths was the only way to save them? Would we do it? I'd like to think I wouldn't. I'd like to think I'd find another way." "Yeah, me too. But I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure anyone knows what they'd do until they're actually in that situation." They talked for an hour, the longest conversation they'd had in years, working through the complicated tangle of anger, grief, understanding, and loss that defined their relationship with their father. They didn't come to any conclusions. There were no easy answers, no neat resolutions. But when Madison finally hung up, she felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, she wasn't there yet. Might never be there, but maybe the beginning of understanding. The recognition that James Thornton had been neither monster nor martyr, but a flawed human being who'd made a catastrophically bad choice and destroyed countless lives in the process, including his own. She put her grandmother's ring on her right hand and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw James's eyes looking back at her, his chin, his stubborn jawline. She was his daughter. That was a fact, unchangeable and permanent. She could hate what he'd done while accepting that he was part of her, that his DNA ran through her veins, that his mistakes had shaped her life. She was Madison Thornton Walsh now, married to Derek, building a life in Chicago, successful and stable and moving forward. But she was also Madison Thornton, daughter of James and Claire, sister to Tyler, survivor of a family tragedy that most people couldn't imagine. Both things were true. Both things would always be true. And somehow, impossibly, she would have to learn to live with that. 10 years after James walked into Pierce Lake and walked out alive somewhere else, the Thornton family still carried the scars of his choice. But they were surviving. They were building new lives from the wreckage of the old ones. And maybe, Madison thought, that was the only victory available to them. Not closure or forgiveness or understanding, but simply survival. The ability to wake up each morning and choose to keep going, despite everything. That was enough. It had to be enough.